Yeah. My mouth is right there.
Okay. You're good.
All right. We're gonna go ahead and get started then. Welcome everybody to the Economic Revitalization Committee meeting. Good. We are in Trade Transit 2 on the 3rd floor in our regular council chambers. The time is 9:01. And we have 2 items on the agenda today. The first, the long-awaited resolution approving BKB for professional design services for the City Hall study. And Council President Yoder, you're going to take this one, please.
Sure, thank you. So what you have in front of you on the ERC agenda here is a resolution to hire an architectural firm, BKB, professional design services. And I'll give a little bit of context about what got us here and then process leading up to today. We have BKB on Zoom. So I'll give them maybe a couple minutes to talk about their background and introduce themselves to the committee. And then we can go into any kind of questions we're having. So last fall, we had some bids to sell City Hall. The majority of council was hesitant to do it at that time because we were missing data on some alternative options that had been discussed that we were interested to see what they looked like before offloading the asset. During last year's budget process, we allocated funding in this year's budget to solicit a firm to capture that data for us. So the beginning of this year, end of January, early February, I spearheaded the effort with a number of council members' help, as well as Bill Scott's help, our city engineer, to develop an RFP to solicit those services. We got that together following legal review and engineering review and had that out, I believe, the middle of March. And I think about the mid to end of April is when we received and closed the process. We got 11 total responses. The way the RFP was set up, this is a feasibility study essentially to look at multiple options to capture the data that we were looking for and don't have to date. That would be 3 different components. We would do another look at existing City Hall to understand costs across the board to get to where we want it to be. That would be looking at a alternative facility that is existing but not under city ownership to do the same thing, understand what it would take to get it from today's point to ready for us to move in, and then looking at a unidentified site, but essentially building a new facility, City Hall versus purchasing and renovating. All 3 options of which have been kicked around, but we have no hard data on. So the RFP is written along that. The RFP is not a low bid type of solicitation, so it's based on scoring. The scoring reflects capturing experience, approach, price a little bit, those kinds of things. So when we got the bids in or the proposals in, everybody had a chance to kind of dive in. The feedback that I got captured in scoring, we had 4 top firms that kind of stuck out. A group of 3 of us and Bill Scott did an interview process for those top firms. Following that interview process, you know, and kind of reflecting on a little bit, the firm that we have in front of us is really the one that stood out to the committee. And from conversations following that with council members, had some consensus to go this route. And so that's kind of why we're here and how BKB was the selected firm. As I said, I know BKB is on Zoom with us. We'll be happy to give them a couple minutes to just kind of talk about their background and their approach to this. and then we can certainly ask them any kind of questions, et cetera. Craig, are you there?
I am, yes. So thank you for the opportunity to kind of present our qualifications a little bit. BKV Group is a national multidisciplinary design firm, and we we heard about this RFP and we're pretty excited about it because it hits a lot of the categories that we like to work on. There's obviously the historic building component, and we've got a lot of folks who are super talented at that, and it always makes for an interesting challenge to solve. There's an accessibility component with the consent decree on the property, and we've done a lot of that work. And then there's of course the city hall planning component of this, and that's one of the areas in which we specialize is municipal facility design, police, fire, city halls, libraries, et cetera, et cetera. So it kind of checks a lot of boxes for us, and we were excited to have the opportunity to propose. The overall strategy is really to provide a lot of data for the review by the city, and to kind of look at all three of those components, the existing conditions of the building and how the historic designation kind of affects our ability to implement new mechanical, electrical, communications, plumbing systems, and how we could do that sensitively, and then looking at the costs of all of that stuff. So we'll explore that in depth, and give you guys some good info on that. We'll get in depth on what it would take to have a city hall that serves Williamsport's needs for realistically the next 20 years, but be adaptable for far into the future beyond that. We don't want to assume what's going to happen more than 20 years in the future and have millions of offices or anything. So looking out a little ways, but really working with you on what the city hall wants to be, and what sort of offices and conference rooms and council chambers, et cetera, need to go into that. And then we'll go through the accessibility piece with a fine-tooth comb and try to figure out how we can creatively resolve the challenges of the building there, and kind of think outside the box and use the equivalent facilitation provisions in the ADA to make sure that we're where we can't meet the absolute letter of the law, we're definitely making it functionally accessible to members of your community. And we'll do similar things for this alternate location that we might be looking at, and then we will have a little bit of the pie in the sky idea about the new construction city hall, and that's more driven by the programming and what we can do, what we can make some assumptions there about maybe how much land would cost and where it could be located and stuff like that. But we'll present you with data on all of those things, especially cost data, and then some pros and cons for staying put versus relocating in one way or another. And then ultimately it's up to the city to make the decision about what you guys want to do. How do you weigh the value of that historic property and staying in that historic property against whatever cost implications there might be to if it's way more expensive, how do you make that call? That's not our judgment to make. That's definitely something that you guys and your citizens are going to have to do. So it's an impartial process, but we want to be able to provide you with all the support necessary to feel confident in your decision.
Craig, thanks. And just a couple final notes about, I think what really stuck out with BKV compared to the other three firms. And again, the four firms we interviewed, they all did a great job. I think what really took us back with BKV, they really did their own work. And so you heard some specific data points about, just the nature of this issue that we've been dealing with the past few years. None of what they just talked about had to be revoked. They knew about it already. We didn't even bring any of it up. And I'll give another example. They were already familiar with the history of the first city hall that is now Old City or the City Hall Hotel. Yeah, correct. So they really did their homework. You know, that really showed in that interview process, really gave, I think, the committee or the group that interviewed, a little bit of an extra level of comfort, and kind of going this route. But again, I don't want to discredit the other three firms that we interviewed. They all did a great job. So we were very lucky in this process to have, a good diversity of firms. And we had some really good options to look through that process. So, correct, yes. Yeah.
Craig, good morning. Thank you for joining us. One of the most important questions that I have, and I'm sure members of the community are going to have, what kind of a timeline are we looking at for this process? And then what are you going to be doing as far as engaging with stakeholders? So the administration, council itself, and the police department for that matter, since they have facilities that are still located inside the City Hall building.
Yeah, I think that stakeholder engagement is a critical part of this process. And so we will, you know, I think we have yet to find out how you guys want to organize your team, but presumably we'll have a point person that can kind of help us pull things together and organize things. You know, we want to meet regularly with each of your stakeholder groups, whoever ultimately the city believes is a critical component of the stakeholders, to make sure that we're getting feedback and we're delivering the data to them. So for the people who are working in City Hall, you know, on a day-to-day basis, you know, we'll sit down with them and try to figure out, you know, ultimately what their space needs are, and go in depth with them on that, and then we'll brief council on kind of the results and maybe get some feedback there, because you guys are your council is a huge part of City Hall as well. You know, you use that building day in and day out. You know, maybe not officing there, but it's important that you have a say in what goes on in there. We'll talk to the police department. You know, if municipal courts are still going to be located in that facility, then we'll have some sit down sessions with them. We'll talk to your facility maintenance teams, whether that's you know, whether you have a bunch of people in-house or whether there's also some out-of-house folks that you use for some of those things. We'll sit down with them and kind of chat through some of that stuff as well. And the goal is to rely on your knowledge of the existing facility and ultimately of where you envision the city to go in the future to kind of craft things together. And we'll bring ideas to the table and kind of prompt you with specific thoughts and concepts and stuff to make sure that we're pretty forward looking, but we're going to rely on your stakeholder teams quite a bit to make sure that we're informed by what your thoughts are and so on and so forth. I'm trying to look here in our original RFP for the schedule. We had, you know, we're probably about a month behind where we anticipated that maybe we would be. And we were looking basically for the very end of August to provide a report for you. So we're probably, you know, would want to say that would be the tail end of September, maybe the last week of September, last council meeting in September. We can provide a kind of a final report and an ultimate presentation to council. You know, the nature of this type of work, this study type of work, is that we can end up, you know, veering off sideways sometimes if something comes up that you know, deserves to be studied also, or you know, if there's a second property downtown that you want to take a look at and stuff, that might adjust the schedule somewhat. But I would think that ends of September would be perfectly reasonable for kind of getting all the data to you and helping to make that final decision.
Thank you very much for that. I'll turn it over to the other two gentlemen on the committee, Councilor Quizzi, Councilor Mackey, if you had any questions you'd like to ask.
Greg, how are you today? John Mackey, Williamsport City Council.
Nice to meet you. I'm good.
Couple questions. What information have you been provided by the city so far in terms of City Hall, things that need to be done there?
My understanding is that we've looked at the data available from the National Register of Historic Places, and it's somewhat limited. We have not gotten a final copy of the consent decree or any plans of the existing building yet. That would be the kind of the very first thing we'd ask for once the contract is signed and we're officially on board. So we have a chance to review that before we head out to Williamsport, and kind of start kicking the tires, if you will. But our understanding is that the police department are mostly moved out. That City Hall and Muni Courts, aren't making use of the building right now because of a major water leak and some concerns about how that's impacted the structure of the facility. And that we obviously understand that there's a consent decree, and we've done a little bit of research onto how that kind of came about and stuff like that. But the review of the I think you guys had an accessibility consultant come out and look at the building and do a report. We haven't looked through that. So I guess let me take a step back. I think I did read all the way through the consent decree, but I don't think we saw the report that you guys had done. So that's kind of the extent of the information we have so far.
Just so you are aware, there is a ADA accessibility report that we have. I believe it's 31 pages long. And it's just basically a list down to the last inch of where things should be according to ADA standards on what exactly needs done.
Yeah.
Not only in City Hall, but in some other properties. And of those 31 pages, I believe 17 or 18 of those are City Hall.
Okay.
By itself. Outside of and just to go back to something else that you said, and this has been a point of contention, I believe, for a couple of years. We are not in City Hall because of it has nothing to do with the water leak. We're not in City Hall because it's not ADA compliant. That's why we're not in City Hall. Yeah. So for me, that's the biggest thing, right? Outside of the ADA compliance issues, what other types of things will you be? I heard you mention you'll speak to the employees. You'll think about what kind of space they actually need to perform their duty, their jobs.
Yes.
I think a rough estimate that I've heard is we're looking at about, we currently have 1,500 square feet per employee. That to me doesn't seem very efficient. So yes, I think that is a big part of the thing that you should be looking at when it comes to City Hall. Some other things I would be interested in are just age of the structure itself, the roof, the HVAC, the heating, that sort of thing. Is there any way that you can get into how efficient it is to heat and cool that building 24 hours a day? We're talking about giant vaulted ceilings. This is a building that, despite what some people may think, doesn't get used all that much. I heard you say we use it day to day as a city council. That's not true. We use it once every 2 weeks. So is that any type of data or information that you can get?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. I think the energy use of the facility is a big component of the decision that you guys have to make, and that's part of the data that we'll provide is sort of looking at that, looking at I mean, certainly if it's 1,500 square feet per staff member, that's well higher than what we would anticipate for City Hall. So there's a downsizing kind of portion of this as well, right? To make sure that we're not, and there might be portions of the building that get shelled out or that would need to be used for something else. We'll help, provide some ideas for that, or ideas for how to, maybe there's a, major structural repairs would occur building wide, but bringing it up to, Class A office standards or something like that would only be done for, 1 or 2 levels, so that you're not spending all of the city's money on something that, where nobody's going to be. So there could be some shelled space considerations as well, and we'll work through all of that stuff with you guys to provide some options for what level you take the potential City Hall renovation. It's it's probably not just three options: the new construction, relocating somewhere else in a historic building downtown, and repurposing this building. Within the kind of repurposing the old post office building, there's multiple options there that will offer to you to show different levels of investment kind of on day one.
Thank you.
Time up. Good morning, Craig. Vincent Melizzi here with Williamsport City Council. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate all the information that you've given and presented, and I had a couple of questions myself. But before I get to my questions, I just want to go over some points as far as, when you gave your brief presentation, as Councilman Biter brought up, some of the city and its constituents are concerned about the time frame in which you would complete the study. Am I correct in the assumption then that based on the dates you presented, that we would have a full, complete study in about 2.5 months' time by the end of September?
I think that's possible. I don't assuming that that we can arrange for the couple of workshops that we need in a timely manner with your staff and stuff. I definitely think it's possible for us to meet that timeline. It's not an astounding amount of work. The really challenging stuff, I think, that's gonna be most time consuming for us to discover and work through is based on review of that existing building, and that's the very first step we'll go through. And so even as that is it takes us a while to churn through that, we've got the most time left in the study essentially to do that. Working with you guys on the programming needs and developing some space planning concepts of how you might slip your offices and conference rooms and chambers into the existing building and stuff like that is honestly it's not nearly as time consuming as evaluating the existing structure and figuring out how to fix that up. So we're starting with the most time consuming stuff right at the beginning, so that by the time we finish with that, we should be finished with all of the other components, and we can get to a successful resolution in 2.5 months. Like I mentioned before, I don't think, sometimes things come up that would cause us to recommend delaying the schedule or adding a component or something like that. But that ultimately is up to you guys. If you want to take the study in a slightly different direction or look at one more thing, and it's gonna then we'll present the schedule implications to you and let you make the decision about that.
I understand. Thank you. Again, to what Councilman Mackey said, is this has been something we've been dealing with for quite some time, and I know a lot of us are looking to get the information so we can finally get this resolved, make a decision, and move forward. Another point, just to touch on real quick during your presentation. So another thing that a lot of our residents that are concerned about is, a lot of our residents are very attached to the history here of the buildings of the area. So I know there was some concern with some people that, the firm may not have the appropriate understanding, knowledge, background, or experience with the in-depth study repurposing of historical buildings. The public doesn't have access to some of the information I think that we may have had in front of us. So could you just give us some quick examples for anybody that may watch this or is listening, that they could jot down and go and look at some of the work that you've been engaged in?
Certainly. So our maybe taking a step backwards, our firm was founded in Minneapolis in 1978. And since then we've branched out to other offices. We've got Chicago, Dallas, Washington, DC, and then we've got satellite offices or fledgling offices in Pittsburgh and New York City and in Orlando. And you know, my I live now in Pittsburgh, and that's part of the reason why we've got this kind of fledgling office here. I've been a partner with the firm for a little while, and family decided it was time to move, you know, back closer to parents, and so we relocated to Pittsburgh, and the firm elected to kind of keep me on board, and so we're looking for work in Pennsylvania, although we're admittedly pretty new to the state. Our historic preservation experience is pretty widespread. We've done a ton of it in out of our Minnesota office because that's the oldest one, right? So we have worked with LeSueur County, with Olmsted County. We've done some historic preservation work with the developer in the Minneapolis area. Some of the bigger ones would be the Millwork Loft and the Pillsbury Flour A Mill adaptive reuse facility. There's one called Else Warehouse. We've got out of our Chicago office, I'm working right now on a renovation of kind of early phase studies of a renovation of a mid-century modern city hall in Bloomington, Illinois. We did a lot of ADA and upgrade type study work for the city of Lockport, Illinois, which is kind of, you know, pretty similar in scope to what you guys have. They're actually it's not a post office, it's a historic school in the National Register, but a lot of similar issues. And then Freeborn County Government Center is another good one to kind of take a look at. And then very recently we completed some massive historic renovations for a fort outside of the Minneapolis St. Paul Airport, and it's called Upper Post Flats. And it you know, it's a conversion of a historic Army fort barracks into kind of keeping it as housing, but it's affordable senior housing. And so all those things would, you know, might be things to look at. We've done some similar work in DC. I frankly am not as familiar with that body of work out of the DC office. But historic preservation and adaptive reuse and sensitively, you know, integrating, you know, modern, you know, infrastructure, basically that communication and plumbing and HVAC that makes buildings functional into those historic buildings is something that's sort of a specialty for us. We've done a lot of it.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that a lot. Again, I looked through your presentation. I saw a lot of the work that you have done. I apologize for having to kind of reiterate that for the public. But hopefully now that you know, with hearing some of the background, the projects that you've done in the past and things that you're currently working on will hopefully assuage some of the concerns of our current residents about the experience and the competency of your firm, that you will, with your scope and your study, that you can still be able to remain sensitive to the historical aspects of the buildings that you're going to be looking at. So thank you very much for that.
Mm-hmm.
I also had a question here, and this is regarding your standard form of agreement that we received. So particularly page 4, Article 3, subtext Article 3.2 and Article 3.3, as it relates to copyrights and licenses. Now, under that, it said the architect and the architect's consultant shall be deemed the authors and owners of their respective instruments of service, including drawings, specifications, retain all common law, et cetera, et cetera. And then 3.3 goes on with the architect grants to the owner a non-exclusive license to use the architect's instruments of service solely and exclusively for the purpose of evaluating, constructing, using, maintaining, altering. So regarding that, forgive me, I'm not a lawyer, but I read through the agreement. Can you put that a little bit in layman's terms for us, just to make sure? Because my understanding of it is that the report, the study, any drawings, they will retain under the ownership of your firm, and then you would grant the license to the city of Williamsport to use that material. Is that correct?
It ends up being a little bit less formal, but the idea behind these clauses in the AIA standard contracts is that, and it is targeted more for new construction than for something like this. That's but the idea would be if we designed a Wendy's or something like that, you couldn't just take our set of documents and go build 120 Wendy's. We want you to pay us for each time you use those documents to build something. Basically, that's what that means. Is that it's a one-off, and if you want to use it multiple times, then you have to compensate for that. And that's the way that the lawyers have kind of come up with a language that will mean that. For your particular project, there's not much of a risk that there's a second one of these historic post offices that was in the exact same condition that could be where what we're showing could even possibly be used again. So it in some senses the language isn't necessary for this, but it's more challenging to edit the standard contract language that the AIA has come up with than it would be worth leaving. So it's kind of worth leaving it in just for simplicity's sake.
I understand that. I appreciate the explanation. I just want to make sure that if we're paying for something that we haven't.
I forgot to mention this, so Austin White report did the CFO with it, it's a standard contract, to Craig's point. This is a standard AIA contract, that language is in pretty much every AIA type of contract, good explanation on background of it, but just for my text.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And just to finish up, I know we all have things to get going on, but this is very important to our residents. As such, I want to make sure that we do our due diligence. Initially, so I definitely am in favor of having all of the information in front of us before we move forward with determining what our next course of action is. I am in full agreement of that. However, initially I was completely against us spending this kind of money on this study, only because I guess I was optimistic and hoping that the city and we may be able to achieve and complete this kind of a study on our own in-house. However, for the sake of timeliness and the sake of thoroughness, and having read through your AIA and your presentation, I do feel confident in that we are definitely going to be getting our money's worth in this study. And to what Councilman Mackey brought up, even so far as you guys doing an in-depth study on cost of ownership, right down to the utility costs, maintenance, looking at, is that going to go so far as to check out like the R values of the installation of materials?
Yes.
That's a pretty thorough study. Because I've always abided by, an old adage that if you fail to plan, well, you're planning to fail, right? And for the city to move forward, to be able to operate and find out where we're going to find a home for City Hall, I think we have to have all the information at our fingertips. So I appreciate all the information that you've sent us. I appreciate you answering the questions that I had. I'm looking forward to seeing all this information. I really, really am. So thank you. I've got further comments.
Craig, thank you very much for joining us this morning. We do appreciate your time today. I'm sure you're going to hear a lot more questions tomorrow.
Sorry, one more thing, and I apologize. Maybe this is obvious, but I just want to make sure for the record, this final report, this is going to include hard numbers. Is that correct? It's going to, and to the best of your ability.
Correct. They will include cost estimates. It's not a guaranteed maximum price or anything, but it will include the cost estimates for the, that's a huge portion of the decision factors here. So yes.
And then also the lands around specifically City Hall and the amount of using parking spaces, that sort of thing, that will also be taken into consideration for all three of these Obviously, new construction's not that big of a deal when it comes to parking, but existing structures, City Hall will be taken into consideration.
Yes, yeah. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Craig, we will be talking with you again tomorrow. We'll have a full body of council to hear from. I'm sure you're gonna hear a couple of other questions that haven't been brought up today. But I'm very satisfied with what you had to say and the report that also I got from Councilman Yoder and others when you had your meeting a couple of weeks ago. So do thank you for that and looking forward to hearing a little bit more tomorrow. We'll move on to item number 2, which is a pretty easy one on the agenda today. Any related items? Mr. Mayor.
I do feel like this is somewhat related to this topic. And I've been meaning to do this at a city council meeting, but just for the sake of the public folks here today, anybody that's gonna be listening to this, and then Councilman President Yoder, you can remind me when exactly we did this, but we changed, I think this was almost 2 years ago, the rules of limited courtesy, whereby you don't have to get in touch with Janice by a certain time frame, get on the agenda. All you need to do is if you come to the meeting tomorrow, you let Janice know that you would like to speak on limited courtesy of the floor. Obviously, it has to be something that's on the agenda. But I feel like that maybe has gotten lost in the shuffle. I just wanted to remind the general public of that, and I apologize in advance to my fellow councilors. Remind me, but I think it's important that the people of Williamsport, the residents of Williamsport, get an opportunity to speak, especially before we vote on something. So I want to make sure that everybody is aware that all you need to do now is show up on Thursday, let Janice know that you want to speak. And again, it has to be limited courtesy floor, it has to be something on the agenda. And she will let us know so that when we get to that, we can say we have some people that would like to speak. I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that.
Very related. Thank you very much. Anything else? Seeing hearing nothing else, I will conclude the meeting then, and since we are in person, we can take a motion to adjourn.
Oh, this is fun. I'll make that motion.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Craig.
We'll talk to you tomorrow.
We actually had.